Hi everyone and welcome to Linda's Italian Kitchen.
This year for his birthday my husband requested torta ricotta e pere. This is an Italian cheesecake from Amalfi Coast and is formed by 2 discs of hazelnut sponge cake that are filled with a mix of ricotta and pears. I'm sorry, no healthy recipe today, but everyone needs a treat time by time, right? My recipe is very similar to the original from Sal de Riso, the pastry chef that invented this cake roughly 25 years ago. In the description you will find the full list of the ingredients that I used and also the link to the original recipe from Sal de Riso.
Okay, I'm ready to start baking.
Let's start preparing the hazelnut sponge cakes. My oven is already on and set at 400 degrees. I start by melting 1 stick of butter using the melting program of my microwave. The butter will need to cool down before being added to the cake batter. Then I beat 5 eggs with 3/4 cup of sugar for roughly 10 minutes. I stop beating when the eggs become of a light orange color and they are very fluffy. Look how nice they are.
Very nice.
Then I mix 7.4 ounces of hazelnut flour and 2/3 cup of flour. If you don't find hazelnut flour, you can blend peeled hazelnut and then sift them to remove any big piece left. I prepared my hazelnut flour starting from hazelnuts that I had to blanch, and that was a nightmare. So don't do my same error, buy peeled hazelnut. I start adding the flour to the beaten eggs, a bit at a time, and I gently mix the butter using a spatula in a circular motion, bringing the ingredients from the underneath to the top. Then I add also the seeds from 1/3 of vanilla bean and a couple of teaspoons of vanilla paste, because I like a very nice vanilla flavor in this sponge. Finally, I also incorporate the melted butter that should be at room temperature by now. Similar to the flour, I add the butter a bit at a time and I fold gently with the spatula until it's fully incorporated before I add more butter. This butter is perfect for 2 12-inch sponge cake. I divide the butter in 2 equal parts, and because I have only 1 cake pan of this size, I will cook 1 cake at a time. To make it easier to remove the hot cake from the pan, I'm using parchment paper instead of grease and flour. I make sure that the butter is evenly distributed inside the pan as a thin layer, and later I start baking the cake at 400 degrees for 12-15 minutes or until it becomes of a nice golden brown color. When I finish baking, I will need to wait that the 2 hazelnut cakes are completely cold before I start assembling the cake. In the meantime, I prepare the filling, starting with the pears, as they will need to cool down as well. Let's start with washing and peeling 1.1 pounds of pears. Don't trash the peel, because we will use it later. I cut the pears in small cubes of roughly 1/4 to 1/2 inch. The original recipe uses a pear from Amalfi Coast called pera pennata. I have found that the best commercially available pears for this cake are Williams pears, also known as Bartlett pears in US. But in reality, you can use any type of pear that you find. Once all the pears are chopped, I transfer them inside a bowl and I add 2 tablespoons of cornstarch and 1/3 cup of sugar, and I mix well. It is very important to add the cornstarch to the pears because when we cook them, they will release their juice and the cornstarch helps creating a cream. If you forget to add the cornstarch to the pear, the filling will become too runny. Then I add also 1 ounce of lemon juice, 1 teaspoon of vanilla paste and the seeds from 1/3 of vanilla bean, and I mix everything well. In a pan I heat up 1 tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil and then I add the chopped pears, and I will let them cook over low-medium heat for 7-10 minutes. This is how my pears look after 5 minutes. As you can see, the starch forms a kind of glue. If you notice that your pears are getting too dry, you can add 1 tablespoon of water and cook them for a few more minutes. Remember, the pears need to be cooked, but still crunchy. I transfer the pears into a bowl and I add 2 tablespoons of triple sec and I mix well. The original recipe uses distillato di pere, that is a liquor obtained from the distillation of pear cider. I don't have distillato di pere at home, so I either use an orange liquor or rum. Then I cover the bowl and let the pears to cool down. In most of the Italian cakes, the sponge is moistened using a mixture of syrup and some alcohol that we call bagna. For this particular cake, I use a pear-flavored bagna that I prepare by boiling for a couple of minutes the pear peel in a syrup made with half cup of water and half cup of sugar and a pod of a vanilla bean. By the way, here I substituted sugar with monk fruit sugar. This is my attempt to make this cake lighter. I filtered the syrup to remove the pear peel and vanilla pod, and I add 3 tablespoons of rum that I'm using instead of distillato di pere. My bagna is now ready. I need to wait that it cools down completely before using it to moisten my cake. While I wait for everything to cool down, I start preparing the ricotta filling. It is very important that your ricotta is dry. For this reason, I let mine in a sieve with a cheesecloth for 1 hour. To prepare this filling, I start by soaking half ounce of gelatin sheet in cold water. I then whip the ricotta with half cup of monk fruit sugar, but you can use also regular sugar. Today I'm using 1.2 pounds of cow milk ricotta. The original recipe is made with 50% buffalo ricotta that is creamier and is also tastier, but I could not find buffalo ricotta in Philly, so I'm using only cow ricotta. I then add seeds from 1/3 of vanilla pods and 1 teaspoon of vanilla paste, and I mix well. In a separate container I whip 3/4 of a cup of heavy cream and 1½ tablespoon of sugar. Then I squeeze the excess of water from the gelatin that by this time is soft and I melt it in the microwave. In alternative, you can also melt the gelatin in a water bath. It's now time to combine together the ingredients for the filling. I start with combining the ricotta and the cream. Then I add part of it to the bowl with the melted gelatin and I mix well before I transfer everything back to the bowl with the filling. Using this trick, we will have a nice and homogeneous cream. All my ingredients are now ready, so I can start assembling the cake. Because I use parchment paper, the edges of my sponges are a bit irregular, so I decided to use a cake ring to cut the edges, just a tiny bit, and make it even and nicer. I will also assemble my cake into the cake ring, but you can use also a spring-form pan or a pan with a removable bottom. I actually find very useful to use a cake collar for these types of cake. I fill a bottle with bagna and I start to moisten the first disc of sponge cake. The sponge doesn't have to be fully soaked, just moist, so don't exaggerate with the amount of bagna. Then I add half of the ricotta filling. I try to create an even layer and I make sure to have the cream also at the edges. Then I form a layer with the pears. As you can see, my pear filling is not wet. This is what you want. I then create another layer using the rest of the ricotta filling. Finally, I add the second disc of sponge cake and I press just a little bit. This helps the cream to get evenly spread, especially at the edges of the cake. Again, I use my bagna to moisten the cake.
Finally, our cake is assembled. As you can see also, I didn't use all the bagna, but that's okay, I have just a tiny bit left.
We will need to leave the cake in the freezer for 2 hours to make sure that the cream is completely solid. You can also leave the cake in the fridge overnight, it works as well. In the meantime, I start working on the decorations, but those are completely optional, as you can decorate this cake in so many different ways. And just confectioner's sugar is actually already enough. I decided to decorate my cake with a whole pear and some caramel. For the whole pear, I picked a small pear and I peeled it. Now I sprinkle it with 1 tablespoon of sugar. I cover the bowl and let it rest in the fridge for at least 1 hour. Don't worry, because we add the sugar, the pear will not oxidize. After 1 hour, this is how my pear looks like. I now microwave it for 4 minutes and let it completely cool down. To make the caramel, I transfer in a small pan 3 ounces of water, 1 ounce of honey and half cup of sugar. I bring it to boil, stirring it time by time, and I wait until a golden caramel is formed. Now I can start playing with the caramel. I have to confess that I'm not very good with it, but every time I try, I get a bit better. I use some parchment paper to create a thin layer of caramel. I'm also using this mold to create decoration that have a half sphere shape.
Our cake is now ready to be decorated.
I remove the ring and dust the cake with powdered sugar. I also remove the cake collar and I add some extra decorations that are completely optional. As you can see, the cake is already perfect. Are you curious like me to see how this cake looks inside? Hey, it's me or this cake is just perfect? Thank you for watching my video. If you enjoyed this recipe, please leave me a like or a comment and consider subscribing to my channel to learn more Italian recipes. See you soon!